Story number 1. It was 1963 that President John F. Kennedy designated the rolling forest land that separates Lake Barkley from Kentucky Lake as a national recreation area. Since that time, this region has always been popular with the hikers and holidaymakers. But in the beginning, European settlers were the first to spot mysterious creatures that dwelled among the trees. Once relations with the local natives improved, the Shawnee tribe told the white man of areas in the forest that they refused to enter. They shared stories of a shape-shifting shaman who dwelled in the woods. But despite knowing this history, thousands of people today will still visit this area known as the Land Between the Lakes. In 1973, a group of male students from Murray State University took a trip to the Land Between the Lakes in their Volkswagen bus. Deep within the woods, they foraged for firewood and set up camp next to the van and settled in for the evening. After a few beers and story sharing, one of the young men made his way into the woods to answer the call of nature. A few moments later, he would emerge in a visibly distressed state, claiming he had heard something circling him while he was doing his business. Laughing off their friend's claim as imagination or a practical joke, the young men continued with their evening. However, as the night went on, the other friends began to hear something circling their camp. The group listened as twigs snapped closer and closer to them. And just as the snapping twigs stopped, and the group thought their unknown visitor had moved on, a deafening, wolf-like howl shredded the peaceful night. Now, having had enough, the friends quickly piled back into their van to take off. But no sooner had they done so, a large, slender shape slammed into the back of the vehicle. The force was so great that it knocked a few of the friends out of their seats. Terrified, the driver put the gas pedal to the floor, but as they pulled away, a shrieking scream and the sound of grinding metal filled the inside of the van. Once the friends were far enough away, they inspected the outside of the vehicle and found 4 deep gashes in the cover of the engine compartment. It was as if something with huge claws tried to stop them from leaving. Story number 2. In July of 1978, a young girl named Jan Thompson had gone to stay at her aunt's house in Grand Rivers for a couple of weeks. Her aunt's place was near to the Kentucky Lake and alongside several popular hiking trails. Jan enjoyed her time at her aunt's as it allowed her to spend time with her younger cousins, Rhonda and Joe. 13-year-old Joe would spend a lot of his time exploring the woods on his dirt bike. One evening, as the girls were sitting outside, they could hear Joe's dirt bike headed back towards the house. Now, they could tell by the pitch of the engine, as it was far too high, that Joe was going way too fast, and they knew something must be wrong. Once Joe emerged from the woods, it didn't take long for Jan to see that he was injured. There was blood dripping from a long tear in the right leg of his jeans. With distressed and fearful tears streaming down his face, the young boy explained how he had been riding home along a trail that ran by the old sawmill when a dark shape burst out of the bushes and tried to grab a hold of him. As soon as Joe had felt the pain of the slice in his leg, he sped up to get away. But looking back over his shoulders, he saw his attacker in pursuit. As Jan attempted to calm Rhonda, who was most upset by her brother's injury, the trio were startled by a loud roar coming from the woods. A figure soon stepped out from the tree line. It was tall and lean and covered in thick black fur. As the kids moved over to the porch, the creature took a few steps forward, which activated a security light on the corner of the house. The light startled the creature and caused it to shield its eyes. This allowed the children enough time to retreat into the house and lock the door. For several moments, the creature remained motionless, as if contemplating whether to pursue the kids or not. Looking through the window, Jan was able to get a good look at their unwanted guest. She was able to determine it looked nothing like the descriptions of Sasquatch that she had heard about. She would later say it was more reminiscent of a dog or a wolf standing upright on its hind legs. Finally breaking its trance from the security light, the creature advanced towards the house. Seeing this, Jan grabbed several large knives from the kitchen and then rushed everyone upstairs where she had them hide under a bed. For the next hour, the terrified children hid, listening to bangs and thumps all around the ground floor, eventually culminating in broken glass crashing to the ground. The noises stopped when a car horn could be heard blowing, approaching the house. A few moments later, Jan's aunt entered the house, chiding the children for not answering her horn blow and helping her bring groceries in. Seeing the terrified faces of the kids, she inquired as to what was happening. Jan told her aunt the entire story, leading her aunt to go outside to investigate. And sure enough, one of the kitchen windows had in fact been broken. On his return home, Jan's uncle listened impassively as the children relayed their story. Asking no questions about the encounter, he simply forbade the children from ever entering the woods again. Story number 3. There is a third and fairly famous story that the beast of the land between the lakes will always be associated with. This is a horrifying tale allegedly covered up by local authorities in an attempt to prevent widespread panic. In 1982, an entire family was murdered while camping in the region. Their motorhome had been discovered smeared with blood, and the mutilated bodies of the father, the mother, and the 13-year-old boy spread around the campsite, apparently having been attacked by something with huge claws. The 9-year-old daughter had been discovered some distance away, with her body having been launched into the branches of a tree. Now, as with most things, there are several different versions of this story that have been passed down from locals. And due to this, a lot of people didn't want to believe the events took place, brushing it off as a folk tale. That is, however, until 2020, when an eyewitness to what happened came forward. A man calling himself Roger claimed that in 1982, he had been invited to go camping with a family at the recreational site. Now, there are a few notable differences between the stories read online and the one that Roger told. For instance, he was adamant that the body of the youngest member of the family was not found in a tree some distance away, but instead was found where she was killed, inside the RV. Roger, at the time of the incident, would have been a 15-year-old boy. While camping with his own family, Roger met the soon-to-be victims. The father was a man named Levi, and he had asked Roger if he wanted to join them on a brief camping excursion. Getting permission from his family, Roger joined the other family in their Royal Imperial motorhome. Levi and his wife had 2 children, 9-year-old Connie and 13-year-old Stephen. Arriving at the new campsite in the early evening of April 7th, they had found that no other campers were nearby. But unfazed by the isolation, Levi and his son walked into the woods to collect wood for their fire. Roger had decided to start his holiday by target practicing on some tin cans. He had brought one of his prized possessions, a .410 shotgun, and wanted to use it. But while Roger was walking around collecting cans, he was suddenly made aware of a disturbance taking place in the front of the RV. Hearing the distressed yells of Levi and his son, Roger ran towards the front to see what was happening. He was horrified to see that the young boy was being attacked by a tall, wolf-like creature standing on 2 legs. Roger arrived just in time to see this creature leaning in to bite at the boy's neck. At this point, Levi had emerged with a 20-gauge shotgun and immediately opened fire on the unknown creature. He managed to shoot the creature in the shoulder, which in turn caused it to release his son. But unfortunately for Levi, the weapon had only been loaded with birdshot, which barely fazed this beast. Turning his attention on Levi, the creature lunged and killed him almost instantly. Terrified, Roger made his way around to the side of the RV, where he began shooting at the creature himself. With his aim being true, one of the shots actually dropped the beast. And while it lay there, Roger took the opportunity to climb up inside the framework of the RV and hide underneath. Just a few moments later, the RV buckled under the weight of something heavy clambering around inside of it. Roger was horrified to hear the women inside screaming right above his head. Their cries of terror were, however, cut short. The creature seen to that. As Roger remained hidden under the RV, he couldn't be positive, but he was fairly sure that he had heard 2 of the creatures. He dare not come out and stayed in hiding until he heard footsteps retreating into the woods. After waiting what felt like an eternity in the eerie silence, Roger finally rolled out from under the RV and ran as quickly as he could to the main road in search of help. A driver of a passing truck stopped to assist the boy. He listened to his story intently before taking him to a nearby farm in order to phone police. When police took the boy back to the campsite sometime later, there were several members of the National Guard and government officials on site. The officials listened and nodded as Roger did his best to describe the events that took place, how the creature looked, and the noises that it made. He went on to describe that even though the attacker or attackers looked canine, they moved like human beings. Everything of value had been found inside the RV, including $20,000 cash. After speaking to the officials, Roger was taken immediately to the airport where he was put on a flight back to his hometown of Cedar Rapids. Traumatized for what he had witnessed, once home, Roger did not speak one word of what happened to his parents. Rather, he watched the news to see if he could find out what sort of spin would be put on this situation. As it turns out, nothing was ever reported on the news. Many years later, Roger stumbled across several different versions of events online, and that's when he realized that it had been a cover-up. As an adult, Roger was able to see this situation and the events that took place for exactly what they were.